Hello and welcome guys, my name's Thomas. This is yet another Cubase tutorial by me, and who would have thought that? Yeah, I didn't, but DJ Matt has asked me on a little tutorial about the tube compressor, and I'm glad to do it. So first of all, what have we got here? We got a little loop. I put it together through the media bay in Cubase, and what I've done here is I mix it down in a basic fashion. It's not, too major. What I've done here, did a bit of EQing, and of course I have a little compressor on the music bus here, which is basically a group channel where everything's routed into. So I can talk over it, and yeah, this is my talk channel, and that's it. So this is how it sounds right now. Yeah, that's it. And it sounds rather nice. And now let's try to improve the sound using compression. Now, again, if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't know why you would like to add compression to a track, rather don't. Go ahead and go back to your EQ settings, or try to think of other ways before you go and just add a compressor just because you can. That's not how it works. Now, in this tutorial, it's all about using the tube compressor, so I might overdo it a little bit just to show you on how you use this compression device. But be careful. Okay, so go into your inserts and insert a tube compressor. Now, this tube compressor is by Steinberg, and it's a standard Cubase plugin. In its standard configuration, it looks like this. As you can see, we have different controls, some unusual for a compressor. Let's walk through it from left to right. As the name implies, the tube compressor tries to emulate a tube compressor, a real device, a real tube compressing device. Now, tubes were used before we had transistors in electronics, and tubes have a very characteristic sound to them, and it's debatable if modern plugins can emulate the sound of tubes, but this one tries it. And what that basically means is that we can have a bit of distortion to our track, which can be nice on vocals and also on guitars, maybe a bit on drums. Wouldn't recommend it on drums actually, but let's just say you could also try it on the drums if you'd really like to. And that's what the first parameter does. We have a drive control. Now, see this little spot down there? I'll move the drive control and you'll watch it. See how it gets brighter? That's actually the tube inside it. And as hotter the tube gets, the more it will glow and the more it will distort. The second control is the input control, which combines both threshold and also the ratio in one. The ratio is actually fixed. It's not variable. And yeah, so you basically, instead of going down with a threshold and setting up your ratio, you just shove signal into the compressor until the compression rate fits your needs. The only way you can do something about the ratio is by clicking this limit button, which will set a harsher ratio in order to achieve much more harsh settings, and therefore have a little limiting going on, limiting compression. Okay, so next to that we have our standard attack control. It's in milliseconds. We have an output, which is basically a sort of gain control. Then we have, of course, release, which can also be set automatically. And we have a mix control, but more to that later. On the right side of the compressor, we've got something very usual and something rather unusual. The very usual is the VU meter, or a display that displays you on how much you've compressed your signal. That's a gain reduction meter. So as much as this needle goes to the left, that's how much how much gain reduction you have. So say this goes to -3, that just means that you have -3 volume units of gain reduction. Now, volume units is a rather ancient measurement analogous to decibel. It's not the same, but it was used for the same stuff that we use decibels today. And anyways, this is just a gain reduction meter. But what's rather unusual about this compressor is that you have a dedicated sidechain monitoring control. Now, the sidechain monitoring control is basically this compressor always has a sidechain. Now, of course, you can feed the sidechain of this compressor by another signal like the drums, which we'll do later, by activating this little button, but it also has an internal sidechain which can be shaped. Now, why is that important, you might ask? Well, simply put, if you have a signal, like let's say a drum kit or a bass signal or something like that, and you have a high peak at a lower frequency that, for example, you don't want to be compressed that hard, you can actually shape the sidechain which the compressor reacts on and bases its compression on to not include that frequency, which means that you have a more gentle compression, much less compression in fact, and it'll allow you for much more transparent settings, which is, in general speaking, a rather good idea. So what you can do is you can disable the sidechain altogether, and it'll act like a normal compressor, compressing the whole signal, doesn't matter what. But the standard setting is with the sidechain on. And what you can do is click the monitor button and you'll only hear the sidechain. Now, you might ask, well, how can I, shape the sidechain? How would I do that? Well, we need to look on the left of this, where we have different controls. We have controls for a low pass filter, band pass, and high pass. Now, low pass simply means a high cut, band pass is a band pass, and high pass is a low cut. So high cut, band pass, low cut. That's how it works. And on the right, on the very right of the compressor, we have a center frequency control, which in the case of the both cuts, it'll mark the corner or the edge frequency. And we have a Q factor. The higher you go, the narrower the band. So the smaller the band. Okay, so let's try this one out. Right, so let's just put it on the drums, solo the drums, and now to dial that in. One tip aside, Alt-Command, or I think it was Control-Alt, plus the solo button is solo safe. Just as a side note. Now, speaking about the mix control, let's put the mix control to 100% so we can hear the full damage the compressor does to this. Okay, so I've set out the compressor now, and well, now we can try out the drive. You will hear much more artifacts coming in. But you'll also hear that it'll fatten up the signal. So up until here it might be okay. So now let's try out the monitor functionality of the sidechain. Let's select a bandpass, tighten up the Q, and select the good center frequency. Low bass, more mid-high, high frequencies, less narrow band. But in fact, that doesn't make sense on a drum track, so let's go with the high pass and set the center frequency to about 260, might be good. You can see that the Q factor in this mode, as well as in the low pass and high pass mode, it does nothing. With all the bass, without it. Actually, in this example, it doesn't make any sense, so we deactivate the sidechain. There we go. And I think that's rather decent. Now we can try the limit. It's rather obvious of what it does. Much harsh settings, and yeah, there we are. So now what we could do is we could set this to limit, and we could use it real good. And now we could do some New York compression techniques, set the mix to 0, and now we mix some compressed signal to the original signal. As you can hear, the kick drum gets a little tighter and everything smacks a little more, which I really do like on this track right now. So let's keep it at that. Now let's try the bass. Oh, one side note. Normally you should try to compress in the context of the track. So let's do this. A little bit of grunchiness sounds good on it. Before and after. Adds a bit to it, which is good. So now let's try a bit on the guitar. Again, makes it a little bit thicker. The drive adds a bit of good harmonies, which are great for the guitar. Now for the Rhodes. Let's have a go on that too. Again, you know, don't always hit a compressor. Might be too much, might be not fitting for what you want to do. Be careful with it. I'm just doing this to demonstrate of what you could do. Now actually for this one, why not? Let's add some sidechain compression. Activate the sidechain. And then what we want to do from our drums, want to go to sends, activate the first send, and send to the input from the compressor. We monitor the sidechain. As you can see, the compressor is triggered via the kick drum in that case. It's not the ideal compressor for this, obviously, but you can do it, and that's why I wanted to show you that. And I think that's it for now, so. How about we try to do some hobby mastering of this? Some of my friends would turn mad for me to call that thing what I do mastering, but anyways, we're in a tutorial, we're allowed to do anything. And there you go, now we've mastered a track. Although I wouldn't really call that mastering, so if I've basically did the term mastering a great disjustice, I'm so sorry, but it's a tutorial, so let me have my fun. And yeah, by doing this, I hope you had a little fun with me, and I hope we'll repeat this together sometime with another subject. But that's the tube compressor for you. I hope you've understood everything that I've explained today. If there should be any more questions, just post them down in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them. Again, use compression with care, don't use it always, don't use it never. See you in another video and goodbye.